There we are. Hi, everybody. And the teenager is back here. I call myself the senior teenager, a millennial in spirit with the benefit of hindsight. And I have a millennial guest with me today. This is Zora Shakti. And she's in a very interesting, very current, very fascinating field of work, something that I am really, really taken up by because it is symbolic of the changes that we see around us. And since I speak on generational issues, this is a very, very relevant area of interest to me. Let me first introduce Zora Shakti. You see her there with me. Zora Shakti calls herself a witch, a healer, an intuitive medium, and a light worker. She's one who practices many forms of divinations and believes that her mission is to help humanity ascend, ascend to the next level of consciousness. She's revolutionary in her thought processes, practices, and follows the path of divine feminine. You can find her. She puts out daily horoscopes at vogue.in, and she's there on Instagram as at Woodstock_witch. So let's begin with Zora Shakti without losing any more time. The hot potato we are playing with today is witchcraft. Zora, my first question to you. What brought you to witchcraft?
Okay. I'll also just take a quick minute to thank you for the lovely introduction, and also thank you for having this space to just grow, evolve, and understand different points of view, because I think it's easy to look at the world through through your own lens. It's always challenging to expand your mind and understand that there are other perspectives which you may not be in agreement with, and that's okay as well.
Sure.
I just sharing my 2 cents. So thank you for having me. Of course, witchcraft is a word that is misunderstood, and it's been maligned, and it has such a dark connotation. And something that I probably didn't talk to you earlier about was, in fact, I've had battles with my own mom about why I'm choosing to use.
I'm sure.
So, and also, like, we're a generation that's driven by labels. And so the reason that I sometimes find it so hard to introduce myself is because you're everything and you're nothing. Like, I'm not attached to any of these labels, and while there are certain roles that we play. And therefore, when I'm using the word witch, it is not to try to make a statement. It's not to try to be bold or try to be like, I'm different and I'm powerful. It's the word witch actually just means wise woman, which is back in the days were just medicine women. They were just women who understood nature, who lived in rhythm, who understood the flow, the rhythm, the flow, the season, the elements, animals, plants, medicine. They just knew how to live in harmony. And I think, and what is wisdom? Wisdom is when you know that you're not alone, you know that your existence is not isolated and you're part of this great whole, whether me and my cat are not different, me and my plant are not different, you, me, and the audience are not different. And I think that ancient wisdom is the reclaim that power, that you are one with the whole and that existence is flowing through you. And I know that in some way these are really big words, but the truth, we already know the truth. We already know what is what, and wisdom is a way of remembering that, because the world that we live in is the matrix or the Maya, where we're constantly conditioned and wired to forget who we originally are. And so being witch is just going back to your roots and remembering that you are a part of this great whole, and that you are a conduit of magic, and that you are connected to the greater, whatever greater source or greater force is. I hope I wasn't too abstract. I hope I was able to.
No, you're talking perfect sense, Zora. But my question again, I'm wondering what attracted you? How did you reach witchcraft? How did you begin to practice it or study it? What did something happen, or was it a sense that things around you are hard to understand, you cannot comprehend them, and all this talk of, the harmony, everybody, we all see that there's shape shifting happening, or there's a meltdown going on around us to varying degrees in different spaces. But what attracted you? What took you there? Is this something, a particular thought or an incident? Yes.
Yes, I think you actually nailed it with the very first thing you said. I'm not being able to paraphrase it, but I would say a huge misfit complex. It's kind of like, as a child, knowing that magic exists, knowing that something larger than the story that you're being told exists, and that constant thirst for that magic, that knowledge, that affirmation that I'm a part of the stars. There is something else happening here that I'm not being told. And so a bit of, I would say, a little mix of misfit complex and existential crisis, which is too early for a child. But that led me to start searching for meaning, searching for divination, spirituality, witchcraft.
Yes.
And of course, it was not around me. It was not in my immediate environment. So it felt like a dirty little secret, like me and the universe trying to like communicate, and me trying to understand and stash these little books, like going to, when you go to you go to those little fairs and stuff, and like whatever 50-100 rupees you can like afford, and like put it back in your bag and bring it and read it secretly. That's how it started. At about the age of around 16, I was introduced to meditation by a friend's friend of a friend of a friend. There was no way that we would have met, but that's how the law of synchronicity works, right?
Yes.
Somehow we got aligned. He was older than I was, and he'd been practicing. And he introduced me to something called the Silva method. Now, the Silva method, in short, is a form of meditation where you train your mind to go from alpha to beta to theta brainwaves. So it's sort of like when you first wake up, you're in that mellow meditative state.
Yes.
So it's about taking you there. And it's a mind control where you start counting 100, count from 100 to 0, and then you train your mind so that at one point you don't count. You can just kind of go into that state. And of course, so we were also young, and it all started with like small silly things like, okay, let's meditate. What does my room look like? What color am I wearing today? But those things are so profound, because you understand that the human eye, the two eyes that we have, are actually a limitation. We are actually capable of seeing so much beyond, seeing, comprehending, understanding beyond what we can see through this. And that was my first taste of it. And, we did it with all honesty and earnesty to like try to grow and develop those muscles. And that's how it started. And then at some point later in my senior college, I felt drawn towards tarot. And the shortest story is that it aligned because my sociology teacher told me to study them as a subculture. And that became like a great starting for me to get my deck and then meet all of these wonderful women and different practitioners. And I didn't have to buy a deck. That was my excuse that, I need to do my project well. And then it just stayed with me. So that's the start.
So Zora, what has the reaction been around you of your environment? You began by talking about your mom, and I'm curious because I'm a mom too, to a young person like you, a millennial who is interested in tarot reading, who is interested in witchcraft. What was the reaction around you? What's your mom's reaction? How do you handle that?
So I have to say, again, I'm a firm believer of the law of attraction. And now the law of attraction is also something that has been kind of diluted. It's been used in a pop spirituality sense. But I believe inner alignment leads to outer alignment, right? So if I am at odds or I am in conflict with myself, that is going to reflect in my world around me. If I am in acceptance of my truth, then there is no reason for anybody to judge me, because everybody is basically holding up a mirror, right? So in my early stages I have, and most witches, practitioners, light workers seem to carry huge amounts of guilt
Oh gosh.
And one of the common theories is that because you've been subjugated in past lives, and the witch burning
I
narrative,
see.
right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
somewhere genetically we carry that trauma and that fear of completely, being ourselves, or owning and expressing our truth. So
Hmm.
I think, and in my opinion, the judgment of the world is very small in comparison to the judgment of your family, because those are the ones that, that's what you actually care about. And so there was an initial, and then all the kids around you kind of take the tried and tested path of whatever
Hmm.
they follow, and you suddenly feel like
Yes.
you paid for this, your parents have paid for this education, and now
Sure.
suddenly you want to so then there's all of that guilt. And again, it seems like revolutionary, it seems like a statement, but at the same time it's not, because it's just living your truth, right? So
Wow. Hmm.
yeah, so there was definitely a lot of like hand holding and trying to explain to her, because she had a very, in the case of my mom specifically, she had this kind of common perception that it has to do with the future, merely the
Yes.
future. And what are you going to gain out of understanding the future? And I had to constantly explain to her that sometimes, well, in my personal practice, uh, I'm not fixated on the future as I am just being a channel for
Hmm.
the guidance, right?
Hmm.
So in a way, you can even say that it's like being a therapist with a somewhat larger perspective, because when the therapist
Hmm.
is working on your mental patterns, whereas a healer or healer will be able to see the larger soul's plan, like maybe some
Hmm.
kind of
Soul's
past
plan.
or some soul contract. And it's not about what's better. I mean, everybody has their own place in the divine matrix of things, but
Right.
um, I had to keep trying to explain to her it's not any different from therapy. They're just uh, people just want to be heard. They just want to tell their stories, and they want perspective.
Yes. Hmm.
And sometimes telling those stories just heals you. I don't even know if they're there to hear me. Maybe they're just there to speak, you know. And so it took a while for her to get to that point where she finally saw that it was taking off, and like it was working out. But it
Hmm.
took many years of like breaking that mold of, I'm not like a religious priest, I'm not here to tell people their future or sell the fear narrative. But other than that, then I remember, because I used to work in the magazine world, in the lifestyle field, and then then I actually remember this conversation just yesterday. A close friend back then, I sat her down when I was making that transition, and tarot for me
Hmm.
has really been something to hold on to. In When I was
Hmm.
unsure, it became that tool. The messages and the answers can come from anywhere, but tarot gives you that tangible tool to harness that
Yes.
guidance, right?
Hmm.
And I told her that I know that there's something more, that this isn't random. I need to work with this. So I sat
Hmm.
her down and I tried to explain to her and get some perspective. And she was like, no one cares about these things, right? You're not going to make anything out of this. And I think, yeah. And so initially these are just like little examples, but circling back to that bit of the outer world being a reflection, I
Yes.
am surprised every time, because when I started my practice, it was, I know it's a little controversial to say this, but I feel like a lot of people now are
Hmm.
taking this up because it's been carved as a niche. Now it's like, हाँ मुझे tarot reader बनना है, हाँ मैं witch
Exactly.
बन जाऊंगी,
It's
but it's
become a
not.
profession.
It's a profession, right?
Hmm.
But it's not a profession. It's my life. It's my.
But Sora, who would have thought, like I call myself a professional speaker, and who would have
Right.
thought professional witch? Now
Right.
that is something new.
Right.
But how has being a witch made you a better person or expanded you? What have you gained from it?
From.
You said
Right.
your truth. How has it helped?
Yes. I'll come. I'll circle back. I'll just wrap up the
Yes.
previous conversation, which
Yes,
is like,
please.
I'm surprised every time by
Hmm.
how warm, open, and loving people are.
Yes.
Increasingly as I grow in my practice, the more receptive I feel people around me are, and I understand that we all
Nice.
have our we all have
Nice.
our
Yeah.
goal, right? Like
Yeah.
someone who's
Yeah.
a banker, they're meant to be a banker. Maybe they're not meant to, like, sell their whatever, live in a farm. And then there's somebody who's meant to connect with the healing energies through farming or through whatever. This is not everybody's path, but if you can
Hmm.
be on your own path and be in the world and yet be receptive, then there is something right in this world, and that is every time I have a conversation with someone who's from a different world and they're just open and they ask questions and they understand. I feel like people need hope, and talking about how they and I think I just have that kind of energy where strangers feel like they can tell me things.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this is a part, like believing in magic is a part of ourselves we hide because we feel like it's silly or makes us feel like children.
Yes.
So they're
Yes.
like, I have never told this to my best friend, but this happened, and then I saw a sign and this manifested. And I was like, yeah, because that's how the universe works. So we're all just looking for affirmations, and that's the sort of response that I've been seeing in the world around me.
Lovely.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice. And you're right. We are kids at heart, and you're something like magic is so charming and so
yeah,
close to,
yeah.
yes, certainly. And your education takes you away from it. And the world talks so much about being very objective, being very
Correct.
fact based, and you stop
Yeah,
seeing these things.
correct.
But Zora, what's the reason that there aren't many, or is there a man witch also, a male witch? Have you come across?
Oh,
Why
yeah,
are more women?
absolutely. My best friend who's been sent out of the room to go play with somebody
Okay.
so that I have some time. But he's more of a secretive witch. He doesn't let anyone know. But okay. Um, well,
Is it a
sorry.
gender? Is there a gender kind of a gender divide or
Yes, I do feel that. I feel like, and I know these are very, again, very like in today's context, politically incorrect and controversial things to say, but
hmm,
the path of the divine feminine, and now I'm not defining gender. I'm defining energy, right? The
hmm,
path of the divine feminine is that of surrender, of flow, of trusting her intuition, of developing her artistic skills, her healing abilities. That is the path of the divine feminine. So I have noticed women, by way of being in that mode, are generally more receptive. I mean,
hmm,
we've all had mothers, grandmothers who like, "Mujhe to pata tha inki shaadi hone wali hai." I just knew, you know,
hmm, hmm,
but like
hmm.
I just knew that this was not going to work out because we're all witches. It's just a matter of tapping into it and harnessing it. Women are definitely more connected, and I feel that men who are um, again with men who are like, I feel like homosexual men are definitely way more receptive, but with
More sensitive. Hmm,
yes, because they're more in touch with their feminine, and I
hmm.
think, lesser the reason we see lesser men in the field has nothing to do with it, has to do with their conditioning because they've been told to look at things objectively and play this role. But increasingly around me, so many, and in fact I've noticed this shift very recently, like this year in 2021,
Hmm,
where
hmm.
so many of my straight friends are just like, okay, tell me more, teach me about straight male
Oh,
friends, like teach me about meditation, and like they want to join these circles and they get moved by the energy. And I always feel like it's an indicator, like my 5 friends who will join the circle are an indicator
hmm.
of the larger shift in the collective, because they were not working separately, but um, I feel like they're catching up.
But what's the reason for this shift? Why do you say, particularly this year? Is it because of all the uncertainty, the maybe feeling a lack of control over things, and then you're
Absolutely.
turning to, okay.
Absolutely.
Hmm,
Definitely first lockdown universally. It's not a gender thing. I think universally we all felt out of control. And a lot
hmm.
of people who had been stuck in the rut of, everyday thing and wanting to seek more, but having job
Yes.
and children and all of that, suddenly, I think especially the first lockdown, it made everyone go into silence. So, everybody that I met came out of it with, I tried these affirmations, and now I meditate, I
Hmm,
have practice. So I think, I know, again, it's a controversial thing to say because it is it was and is a dark time, but that is what is pushing
Mm.
towards inner awareness, because it all of the growth happens through contrast, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
Yes.
this might be sense.
You are a self-taught witch, Zora.
Really?
But is there, is, right? You're
I,
self-taught.
yes, but I have had definitely wonderful mentors and teachers. Like I keep, wherever I get the chance to gain knowledge, I will go. But
But I'm just sorry, Zora, I'm just thinking that with as it becomes a profession and more people begin to take this on or join this, then there will be talk of some kind of a community, a training setup, maybe a commune, not a commune, maybe a clan. How do people pick
like a
up
cup,
these skills? Yes.
right?
Does it exist? Does anything like this exist anywhere in the world?
Well, there are many spiritual communities that
Hmm.
exist.
Hmm.
I'm finding this a little hard to define because I have seen and I have been a part of them as well, but it's very in the flow. Let's say a group of individuals coming together to
Yes.
do for something for a short period of time, and then they may meet and then they may. There are definitely awakened communities that are working towards their personal development.
Okay. But I also hear of some young people, teenagers, for instance, getting affected by the media stories. There was a Twilight series, and there was a Sabrina, and there have been other books and movies.
Mhm.
And I've heard some parents express concern that they are getting too deep into it, or they might cross a line
Mhm.
into the darker side of witchcraft. Have you those concerns? Have you come across something like this happening?
So, um, I'll be honest, in my
Mhm.
journey, I think it's been pretty, how do I say? Like I said, everything is a contrast of darkness and light.
Right.
And
Mm.
a lot of, and the reason you seek the light is when you're shown some darkness. But for
Yes.
me, I would say that I'm digressing a little bit, but it's because you asked a certain question that I didn't fully answer before. So a term that we use a lot in witchcraft is shadow work. I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
familiar. Shadow
No, I'm
work.
not.
But
Ah,
it's the understanding that we are both light and shadow, right? Like there are some things, if I'm a warm person, I'm also an angry person. If I'm a brave person, I'm a
yes.
fearful person, right? And also witchcraft is liberating because it says that I am in acceptance of my shadow, because unless I can't say be positive and put a rug on all the anger and the hatred and the jealousy. I have to use all of that as a fuel for my growth.
Right.
So I have to sit down with it. I have to accept that humanness, and in accepting and working on all of those deep, fragmented parts of myself is when I come into my light, right?
Hmm.
So I would say specifically for me that it's been more of the physical aspect of the shadow work, like understanding certain patterns. But
Hmm.
circling back to what you asked about teenage movies, I actually know a lot of, I have a few close friends who would be in my age group whose starting point, I think there was a movie Craft when we were younger, or
Mhm.
that in some way became the starting point for their exploration. And then, you draw that pentagram and you do like these little
Yes.
quills, whatever pop spirituality teaches you. But I, in my experience, that curiosity or that starting point then led them to dig deeper and understand the true meaning of witchcraft and spirituality. So where they are now,
Hmm.
very different from where they were 10 or 15 years ago in college.
Okay.
So
Right.
um,
Yes.
and that said, I would still say that everything has boundaries. Don't remove an Ouija board and
Exactly.
late
Exactly.
night you will call dark energies. So some simple rules for newbie witches is that always cleanse your space and practice in the daytime, because post sunset is when,
Okay.
if you're not a regular practitioner, it's very easy for you to get swayed by those energies and you don't want to play with that.
That's interesting, Zora. That means there are certain protocols in place to keep yourself safe and do it the right way.
Absolutely. You have to keep cleansing your space and your energy.
What is the inspiration from Indian, let's say Indian spirituality or Indian mythology? Do any of your contemporary contemporaries who practice witchcraft, draw upon any Indian sources?
Actually, I would like to mention, have you heard of Ipshita Roy Chakrabarti?
Say that again. I missed the name.
Ipshita Roy Chakrabarti.
No, Zora, I don't. I'm afraid.
Okay, so she has published the book Beloved Witch, which was something that
Okay.
I read maybe in my early 20s, and that was something that moved, like the word that I was left with was power. She
Wow.
uh, of course she's much older now, she's still practicing. Her community is called the Wiccan Brigade in Calcutta,
Mhm.
but she's definitely, I think, one of the more renowned quote unquote mainstream witches in the country, who's not misused it to kind of like pander to the common public, who's like really stayed in her power.
Hmm.
And that book was life changing. Like, it shook me out of some kind of deep slumber, because it just, simply because of her tonality, like she was so confident and so believing in her path, that it kind of
Hmm.
really reminds you of your power.
Wow.
So that's something I would
That's
definitely
interesting.
recommend everybody to look into,
Okay.
if this is something that they feel, if this is a path that they feel called towards.
For the sake of people who are watching and listening, what is Vika? What exactly is Vika? Vika.
Well, it's very hard to define Wicca, but I would say that it is a part of paganism. And I would circle
Hmm.
back to where we started the conversation, to just to keep it simple for now, but to
Hmm.
live in harmony with nature, to honor the elements, and to honor the ancestors and the greater spirits that are working with us. To really simplify, this is my definition or my take on it.
All right. And what is your sense of what's happening right now in this field? And in future, what do you see it as becoming? Is it a trend that is likely to continue to grow? And what are the possible tracks that it could perhaps, be kind of troublesome for it to go on?
Right. Well, I definitely think that we cannot grow individually. We have to grow as a collective. So if
Hmm.
you're growing, I'm growing. If I'm growing, you're growing. But what I do see is that, because now it's acceptable. First, it was a taboo. It was still like something somebody that you knew did and you were curious about. Because of that, people want that label of being a witch, and they're not
Hmm.
prepared. Like, you have to have done groundwork. You have to
Hmm.
have a foundation. And lots of people want to do one ritual, one course, buy one deck of cards, and then just announce. So,
Hmm.
and that's okay, that's their journey. But as a consumer of that information, it's very important for you to know who you are laying your trust in. So be
Right.
careful who you are following, who you are listening to.
Hmm.
Make sure that whoever you are seeking guidance from is authentic, because there's a good chance that they're still finding themselves.
Right, so right. What's fascinating is that perhaps in your own circle, it may be accepted, maybe the younger people,
Right,
but in my generation,
right.
many of them are completely unaware. It comes as a bit of a jolt to them because they associate witchcraft with the uneducated, illiterate, rural folks,
Yeah.
like nuskhas, yeah, totke.
Yes.
It's hard to associate it with an educated urban millennial like you and trendy millennial, very much plugged into the culture. And so there are huge swaths of people who are not aware of this. In
I,
fact, even when I announced this,
yeah.
when I shared this with friends, they were taken aback. What are you saying? Does it exist? Even I have come to learn of it only lately. Then I started reading about it.
Right. Right.
So it's still a very, I think it's still a new thing.
I
But
understand.
so where do you see yourself, and how do you update yourself? How do you stay on top of your skill, and how do you keep yourself sharp?
So I think it's always, like I said, I it's always an inward process, right?
Hmm.
If I was in the corporate world, I would have landmarks, or I would have like sorry,
Yes.
marks and constantly compare, but this is such a soul. Yes, there's a community and there's a coven, but the only way that I can update myself is working on myself, is on not getting
Yes.
carried away by the outside world. I have to be grounded in my own spiritual practice, and I have to keep being present to whatever my shadow is showing me and keep transmuting that. I mean, I feel like I just have to focus here. Everything outside will sort itself out. Because
Right.
I also believe in a very subconscious process of manifestation. Of course, I want to grow. I want to have a greater influence. I want to have all of those things. I want to be able to have my own
Yes.
community and teach more and train more.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's not an outward manifestation. I just have to keep working on my energy, and it sort of creates that magnetic force where those things flow into your existence. It's a more yin form of manifestation, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Zora, are there covens in India?
Well, I would say that in small ways, yes. Every now and then I will have
Communities.
yeah, every now and then I will practice with my close friends. We will do a new moon, a full moon ritual. That's what I said. It's a very flowing space. It's not uh, it's not like, oh, we work together, we do
So
everything.
rigid, yes.
It's not rigid. It's always in the flow, but definitely, covens exist, communities exist. You are when you vibrationally feel that alignment with somebody, you will feel drawn to practice your magic with them.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one last question, Zora, for you.
Yeah.
What is feminism? How would you associate that with witchcraft, and how is it anti-patriarchy? Because patriarchy is a word that my generation has heard from your generation. We weren't even conscious of the word.
Correct.
We knew of it as an academic word, but a very conscious push against this is something that came up with the next generation. Yes, so that part, that aspect of witchcraft.
Well, like I said, I do feel that essentially it is the path of the divine feminine. It is the path of the goddess. And the reason that women are constantly fed the story that they're not powerful is because they
Yes.
are so powerful.
Yes.
Because men are afraid of what the society will actually be if women were in their power. Like, for instance, in ancient Egypt, it was mostly the goddesses who were and the queens who were in power, and the men sort of played the subordinate role. And I like, anyway, I don't want to get into like the political debate of it, but I think if I had to really simply put it, it's just a way of reclaiming your power in a world that tells you that you're powerless.
Yes, your own autonomy or your own sense of direction, maybe the fact that you exercise some control.
And because we're also constantly fed the story that you need a priest or you need somebody else to help you connect with the divine, but you are already divine. Why does somebody else need to tell me that?
And so their mothers like me telling their kids, get married.
No, I mean, marriage is a different thing, please, by all means. But I'm just, I don't need the priest to tell me how to pray. I know how to pray.
Yes.
So it's very powerful to know that you can connect with the divine forces, that you don't need to go through somebody else's door, that the door exists within you.
Yes, it's a social message that you constantly get, that you're not enough, you're not well so-called settled yet, or you're not there yet, and there are these milestones to be met. And similarly, that there's a very prescriptive view of spirituality or any kind of insight you might get. Yes, absolutely. I agree there. Thank you very much, Zora, and this was wonderful. Since we agreed to spend only 30 minutes of this, I'm ending this. I could have gone on and on because this is really, really fascinating, and all the very best to you, Zora, in the fantastic work you do. You have a lovely taste, and the posts on Instagram are very, very eye-catching, very appealing, very powerful.
Thank you.
Anything you want to say, Zora, as we go off the stream? Any last famous words?
Just remember your power. That's it.
Just remember your power, prophetic. Yeah. Thank you, Zora. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, everyone. I'll be back next week with another episode of Teenager Seeks. We'll seek new answers to a new hot potato.